My name is Christina Gugino, and I'm an OCD Massachusetts board member. Welcome to the Les Bradford Memorial OCD Lecture Series. Tonight, Dr. Lisa Coyne will be discussing acceptance, mindfulness, and OCD. Dr. Lisa Coyne is the founder and director of the New England ACT Institute and an assistant professor of psychology and director of the Early Childhood Research Clinic at Suffolk University in Boston. She has adapted and used acceptance and commitment therapy for families of young children struggling with emotional and behavioral problems, and applies her research to clinical work with young children living in poverty. Please welcome Dr. Lisa Coyne.
Hi guys, how are you? Can you hear me okay from here? Yeah. It's funny, I'm listening to all that. Thank you for that really lovely introduction. And I'm thinking, wow, those are a lot of really big words. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm feeling really anxious about giving this talk. And I'm noticing my heart is really pounding kind of hard. And it's always such a surprise to me, having given so many talks, that it shows up every time. Have you ever had that experience? Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. And I appreciate your time today. I'm told that we need to be out of here in exactly an hour, so I'm going to shoot for that. So, my goal tonight is to tell you a little bit about acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a therapy, but I also like to think of it as sort of a philosophy for living. And one thing that Christina didn't mention is that I'm an ACT trainer, which means that I have participated in a peer review process for learning this approach. And one thing that's important about that is that in order to really become a trainer, you actually have to walk through this approach yourself. So all of the ideas, exercises, and experiences that I'll be sharing with you tonight are things that I have tried and done. Okay? And so just to know that. So this is, generally speaking, what ACT is about. We have a lot of treatment approaches that are quite excellent, that are geared towards what we call symptom reduction, making our pain and suffering and anxiety go away. This is a little bit different from that. This is sort of what we mean when we say ACT. ACT is about doing the things that you care most deeply about as a person. In spite of the presence of pain or suffering, because we all know, and we've all had enough birthdays to know that each of us is at one point or another going to experience loss or disappointment, stress, embarrassment, frustration. And I don't know about you all, I'll speak for myself, but I very often have the thought that somehow, no matter how much I do or how much I try, I am not enough. What I do is not enough. So, ACT sort of posits that pain is a part of life. And even given that, we can live lives that are meaningful and valuable, even in the presence of pain. Now that sounds well and good, but we all screw it up sometimes. So it's also about noticing when we're not doing that, and then learning to turn back to those things that we care most about. So I didn't do a research-heavy talk for you tonight. I am so happy to tell you all about that if you wish, and I am happy to provide slides to you about all of this after the talk. But I wanted to just give you a brief summary about the evidence base for ACT, which is small and growing. We do have some evidence, and it is based on very sound evidence about how our minds work, about our language processes as humans, and what we do when we experience stress and distress. And it's worked for a variety of people and difficulties. We have a pretty strong evidence base in the area of chronic pain, growing evidence bases with depression, anxiety, OCD. Smaller evidence bases still with children and adolescents. But strikingly, actually some of our best work with children is with children in OCD. It's also been used in many different working environments, with parents, with working professionals, executives, teachers, who work with children with disabilities. So the nice thing about this is it's sort of a very flexible approach that's useful all over the place. So there's a very specific sort of philosophy that underlies ACT. Lots of times, I know that when I've had difficulties and I have sought out help, sometimes I've sat in a room with someone who I felt is an expert and who will tell me what to do because they have a skill set that I do not have. They have some capacity for coping that I do not have. Actually, behind ACT is this philosophy that none of us are different. Our minds all work the same way. We're all human. And while your struggles might be very different from mine, and perhaps deeper, wider, narrower, less, who knows? We're all fundamentally the same, and our minds work the same way. It also posits that no matter how much we fight it, while life has its very beautiful and joyful parts, it also has pain and suffering. And that's a fact. So given that, what the heck do we do with that? Right? So I'm going to show you, actually, some of the techniques that are used in ACT. And my goal really is to show them to you and not tell you about them necessarily. And so what I'm going to ask is for your willingness and your permission to participate in the things I will walk you through. There's no have to in this workshop. So I'll present different tools and techniques. You are invited to try them. You do not have to do it. That's completely fine. People opt out all the time. People opt in all the time. Okay? But if you do choose to opt in, you give it a shot. There might be something in it for you that you haven't seen before. And whatever things come up for you during these, it's totally fine, no matter what they are. Okay? So I'm going to start by telling you a story. Okay? There was a monk, and he was a student, he was a novice, and he was really struggling with a lot of things in his life. And he just was really down, really depressed. And so he went to his teacher and he said, you know, I'm really struggling, I'm having trouble with a lot of things, what do I do? And the teacher thought for a moment and he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a tablespoon of salt and I want you to put it in a glass of water, stir it up, and take a drink. Will you do that? The student did. And the teacher asked him, what was that like? He said, it's awful. It tastes horrible. I didn't like it at all. And the teacher nodded. Then he said, okay, can you try something else for me? Are you willing? And he took him for a walk to a lake in the mountains. And they went down to the shore of the lake, and the teacher said, I want you to toss your tablespoon of salt in this lake. And now I want you to take a drink of the water. And the student did. And what do you think he said? What do you think he said? Yeah, it tasted different and actually have that salt taste. And that's sort of what ACT is about. The pain of life is the pain of life. We're going to have it. The trick is, can we make life bigger to better hold that pain, such that it doesn't direct our behavior? So, in a nutshell, ACT means to accept, to notice that, in fact, pain has a lot of pieces. Some of them are gorgeous, and some of them to connect. To connect means to touch what it is that matters the most to us. Okay? I had an interesting thought about this. I don't know if you're all religious. I'm actually quite not. but I grew up Catholic, and I keep hearing stories about this new Pope. And the latest one that I heard today was that he's been sneaking out of the Vatican at night and ministering to the poor. I think that's really cool. You know why? Because he's connected with what is most important to him, and he's living it with integrity. That's what connect means. Not just to think it, not just to intend it, but to do it. Okay? So to connect with what we care the most about, and then finally to take action, to do it. Now, the inherent flaw in this whole model is, of course, that it's hard. And, of course, it's uncomfortable sometimes to do those things that most matter to us. So, for example, I mentioned my heart pounding. This is actually much better. It stopped. I'm delighted with this because I don't love the whole anxiety sensation of when I'm talking. But when I first started giving these sorts of talks, I actually would overtly panic, which was really no fun. Anybody in here ever have a panic attack? You don't have to raise your hands. But, so you know what I mean, right? You know the kind of volcano of whoosh, you know, the anxiety. That was no fun. And for a long time, I actually avoided giving talks. I would make my students do it. Like poor Carlos here, he didn't have to. He's new. Thank God you don't have to go through that. But I would actually say, I'm just going to do a poster at a conference. I'm not going to give a talk. Or I just won't do it at all. And I realized that that made my life very small, and it made my voice very quiet. And I really didn't have very much of an opportunity to do what mattered to me, which was to teach and to share the things that I think are helpful, that I have tried, that I have taught people and seen helpful. And that was the crux of it, was deciding, even though I'm anxious, even though I might panic, even though I might be uncomfortable and have that disgusting GI stuff going on before and after, and that de-stress headache afterward, that bone hard headache that you get after you're really, really stressed. No fun. I said yes. And lo and behold, a funny thing happened along the way. I was in Parma, actually giving a talk. Actually several. I gave like 5 or 6 talks, including a 2-day workshop. And it wasn't until 2 days after this conference that I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't even anxious. And it wasn't even like, oh yay, I'm not anxious. It was like, I didn't even notice that I wasn't anxious. I was just happy that I had given the talk. Okay? That's what I mean when I say accepting, connecting, and choosing. Now it's hard, and I don't always do it either. Okay? But that's sort of an idea of what it might be like. So there are some tools that you might need or find helpful along the way to doing this. And you may have heard this term mindfulness. We've been throwing it around here now in the 20th century, although it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And there are people far more practiced at it than we are. But it's sort of something that has come to the surface in the behavioral sciences. It's something that might be a really, really important and good tool. Not to make sad things go away, not to make difficult things go away, but simply in and of itself, a way of being and a way of experiencing your world. And I like to think of it as exploring the present moment. Okay? What does it mean to be an explorer? Think about that. Think about back in the day when folks thought the earth was flat. Think about what it must have taken for folks to say, I'm going to go sail to the edge of that and see what happens. I mean, they quite literally thought they were going to fall off the edge. Not to mention the sea monsters and the sea serpents. Imagine that sort of curiosity that drove that willingness to experience and to explore. Right? Now we know the earth is not flat, but there are things in our lives that are that scary and that hard, that we are scared that if we go there, we might not ever come back. We're not going to go there tonight. But I want to show you a way, step by step, if you're willing, that might be a different way to experience some of those things. Exploring the present. Think about where you spend most of your time. Okay? We have amazing minds. They're great tools. They really are. I saw a cool quote on Facebook, is really where I do most of my research these days. Not really, but sometimes. And it said, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And our minds are really brilliant at reminding us of all the things that we have done or failed to do in the past. They're really, really great at helping us worry about, figure out, problem solve, avoid all of those scary things that might happen in the future. Think about your day today. Think about how much time you actually spent in the present moment, right now. Just noticing the people around you, your task at hand, before your mind started talking to you and swept you up. Do you ever have that experience where you're just really not there? My kids tell me I do this all the time. Mom, 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 where are you? And I'm on my computer worrying about the class I'm teaching tomorrow or what I didn't do well today. So if you were to think about a percent of time you actually spend in the here and now, who says 90% of the time you're in the here and now? You can raise your hands for this one. 80%. Okay, notice I'm not raising my hand either. I'm supposed to be good at this stuff. How about 60%? 50? Yeah, maybe 50, maybe half and half, 40? How about 20% or 10? I'm probably a 10. On my good days, maybe a little bit more than that. Okay? Isn't that interesting? That we could spend most of our time outside the present moment. While you're outside of the present moment, as most of us are most of the time, admittedly, how does your mind treat you? Does it say stuff like this? Is mine the only one? Oh my God. I'm sorry. So I'm seeing smiles. Our minds tend to be our worst critics, if you haven't noticed this already. It's really funny, whenever you get into a social evaluative situation where you're kind of thinking, maybe I'm not so good at someone else, it's not even the someone else that you're really worried about. It's your mind telling you, actually, you're not going to fare well. Okay? You ever think about the words we have for emotion in this culture? Do we have more words for positive emotions or negative emotions? What do you think? Who says positive? Who says negative? Why is that? Isn't that interesting? Our minds feed us lots and lots of things, and they're constantly working. You may have noticed. So what's mindfulness then? Okay. Mindfulness isn't to make all of this activity stop. This activity is going to go on no matter what we do. And if you don't believe me, go home with your mind and notice. And see what you notice. See what it says to you. Okay? Mindfulness is about, however, choosing. And all of us, we do have a choice about what to pay attention to. If we are awake, aware, and willing to notice what's going on, we can choose what we attend to. Okay? So choosing to pay purposeful, curious attention to what's going on right now. And when I say paying attention, I mean noticing with your 5 senses. Your sight, your hearing, touch, taste, smell. Basic senses. Noticing. You're having lots of thoughts. I'm having lots of thoughts right now. I'm having the thought that this is a very quiet audience. I'm having the thought that I'm wondering if they like this talk. I'm having the thought that what if they are like not like thinking the things I'm thinking. Oh my gosh, they're looking at me funny. My mind is feeding me all sorts of stuff. I don't know if your mind is doing this, but my mind is constantly working. And it's actually, if I attended to it, it could really derail me. I could let it derail me. Okay? It's still going. I can't do anything to stop it. It's just going to keep going. I've known it for 43 years. I wish it would stop, but really it doesn't. Okay? So noticing your thoughts. It's mental weather. And noticing when you get hooked by a thought. Gently noticing that and bringing yourself back. Have you ever had a thought so distressing that you just absolutely weren't aware of what you were doing? Have you? Me too. Me too. When I was pregnant, actually right after I had my daughter, my first child, I had a little bit of recurrent intrusive thoughts, a little bit of postpartum depression. And I would be driving to work, and I would have images that were horrific, that would nearly make me lose control of the car and make me drive off the road. Ever have that? Our minds are very powerful, and they can be really helpful, and they can hook us right out of the present moment and right out of what we were doing. So ACT is about teaching you, how do you notice when that happens? And what do you do? What can you do? And finally, making room for all the sensations, thoughts, and emotions as they are. So in a nutshell, it means saying yes to whatever's going on for you right now. Sound hard? Sometimes it is. And there's something in it for you. So, with your permission, what I'd like to do, and you do not have to do this again, is I'd like to lead you through some really simple exercises about mindfulness to show you, because I can talk about this stuff all night long, just the way I could talk to my, nearly driving age daughter about how to drive a car. But she's not going to know how to drive the car unless she gets in it. So, I want to invite you to try to participate in these exercises. You don't have to. But what I'm going to do in a minute is ask you to close your eyes and lead you through a very brief mindfulness exercise that involves paying purposeful attention. Are you willing? Yes? Cool. Thank you. That's awesome. And if you're not, that's cool too. So this is an eyes closed exercise. You may also do it with your eyes open. If you choose that, that's fine. It's just helpful if you kind of direct your gaze at the floor or your knees or whatever, so you minimize the stimulation that you're getting. I tend to do them with you, so if you look up and my eyes are closed and I look really weird, that's what's happening. I'm not having a seizure, although that's possible. Okay? So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is simply close your eyes and take some deep breaths. Noticing what it feels like to breathe. Noticing the sensation of your lungs filling completely and empty. Noticing how your chest and your shoulders move as you fill your lungs and as they empty. Noticing that when you breathe in, the air is slightly cooler than when you breathe out. Now, as you are doing this, you may notice your mind is busy. Perhaps it's making a list of the things you have to do tomorrow. Perhaps it's commenting on the exercise itself. Perhaps it's telling you you're doing it right or wrong. That's just what minds do. Perfectly normal. Simply notice that Make room for your mind to do its thing. And when you can, when you notice, bring your attention back to your breathing. See if you can notice your breathing without trying to change your breathing in any way. Simply let your body let you know when it's time to draw in a breath and time to let it go. Of course, your mind may start commenting on your ability to do that. Simply notice that. And when you can, bring your attention back to your breath. Just bring some curiosity to what it is like to simply notice your breathing. Bring curiosity as though you were a small child who never experienced this before. You have no idea about how this works. Notice what it feels like to be in this room with all of these people. Some you may know, some you may not. As you notice your breathing. If you experience any discomfort or urge to move forward more quickly, or anxiety about noticing your breathing, simply make space for those sensations. Just let them be. Can bring your attention to your breathing. In a few moments, we're going to transition out of this exercise. Simply take a few nice deep breaths, enjoying the sensation of drawing in air and letting it go. Noticing each in-breath has a new beginning. And each out-breath as a complete letting go. Taking one or two more nice deep breaths. Perhaps doing a little stretch. When you're ready, open your eyes. So with your permission, I'd like to ask you, what did you notice during that exercise? Is anybody willing to share sort of, and there are no right or wrong answers. Everyone has equal capacity to notice. What did you notice? Yeah.
I noticed that I was completely comfortable. Before the exercise, I had my legs crossed and my wrist raised, and I couldn't quite get comfortable in the chair, but while I was sitting there doing the exercise, I just felt completely comfortable.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Did other folks notice other things? People have all sorts of reactions.
Oh, yes. More relaxation.
More relaxation. Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah.
I actually have the opposite. Because so I have like hypochondria, so I have lots of body noise. So when I try to do that stuff, like my body goes crazy, like literally starts twitching and like doing all crazy things that makes me. And I also can't take deep breaths, and it feels like someone's strangling me. So it overwhelms me to try to take.
This is very hard. And you did it.
Like I tried. I made it about
Thank
halfway
you.
through, and then it was mad.
I appreciate you doing that. And you know what? Lots of people have that reaction to it too, especially when they're first doing it. So noticing some of those things can be really fun. So thank you for sharing.
Problem.
Cool. Other folks? Yeah.
I couldn't wait for 2 hours.
Yep, same word. Are you willing to say more?
Yeah, I could, like I said, a hard time keeping my eyes closed and keeping my mind like calm. And I didn't feel comfort in the chair. I was like, my butt hurts, my back hurts. I didn't like focusing on my breath because that made me like beaches.
And you tried it anyway. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate your willingness. So real diversity of experiences. What do you think the function of that was? What do you think my goal was with doing that exercise? I'm just curious. Yeah. Exactly right. Just being in the present. The present moment can hold all sorts of things. And I have to say, having done this a lot, I have all those I have those experiences as well. And I have really positive experiences. It's a mixed bag. Do you feel more present after doing that? Or do you feel, does the room feel different at all to you now that you've tried it? A little different. Yeah. Can you say how?
I noticed the temperature, how cold it is, and how the cold it is settling on the body. I could hear, I was hearing like my breathing, voice, moving. I think it was very loud.
Oh yeah.
Really loud breathing, but it wasn't. I don't think it really was.
So really noticing the physical quality. Yeah.
I think when a group gets led through a shared experience, it changes sort of the community sense and my life and my experience in other activities, that it brings people together or the person, no matter what the reactions to it were, or how easy or hard it was, it's a shared experience.
Yeah.
I also, and I had a comment earlier that I almost made, that the reason for doing this is also that people hear about this a lot and they go, oh, yeah, that's not
What is that?
Yeah, that whoever makes time for it. And so to actually stop and take a few moments to have people at least give it a try is, I think it's an opportunity because it's too easy to just brush by it and you're meeting by
As a matter of fact, it's a really excellent point. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. I'll come back to that. I want to say something.
Was that when you're in the present, you just kind of see your thoughts, and you kind of already something like they're just thoughts that are just kind of floating in and out. Here, just like
So that's two really excellent points. I want to come back to both of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed that when I have my eyes closed, like the worries in my life are still there.
Yeah.
You know, like the things you stress about are still there, but it's a little bit easier to maybe accept when you're doing something as routine as just breathing. And then of course is like, you know, accept like things you can't change that you just keep breathing.
Cool. Very cool. A wealth of different experiences, and I appreciate all of you sharing that. What I wanted to say about making time for this, why would we want to make time for this? Well, there is some data suggesting that mindfulness can be useful in the sense of helping us stay connected to the present moment. I have trouble making time for it. And to confess, I actually don't do any sort of regular meditation practice whatsoever. When I meditate or work on mindfulness is when I'm doing daily activities like cooking or folding laundry or washing the dishes, or my favorite, running, is great. Because running is full of really uncomfortable experiences. And I could run and fight them the whole time, which would leave me probably doubly exhausted. But what I choose to do is notice them and have some me time and just sort of notice what's going on around me, noticing how beautiful the leaves are, or that it's slightly colder, or that, oh my gosh, I'm going slightly faster than I did 6 weeks ago. Okay? So something about that. And there was this other piece about noticing, two pieces about, you know, the worries and things are still there. And again, this isn't about making anything go away, because you guys check out your own experiences. I haven't found anything to make worries go away. I haven't. I'd love to tell you I did. I really would. But there's something else that happens here, where they cease to direct us. They cease to have the bite, maybe, that they once did. And I was talking to a mentor about this once who struggled with depression and suicidality when I was first learning this approach, and I said, Kelly, but do you still get depressed after you learned this approach? And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, yeah. And then he said, but it doesn't mean what it once did. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And the same thing, I used to think, I can't because I'm anxious. I can't cough. I can't be of service because I will crash and burn. And now I think, I can talk and I can make my very best effort and I might crash and burn. And it might suck. It might suck balls. Sorry. That never shit. And I can be anxious. That's the difference. So I want to talk a little bit about how do you get unhooked? And I want to show you, actually, rather than tell you, how you might do that. So I'm going to do another brief exercise. This is not one where you have to close your eyes. This is not one where you have to say anything. In fact, I'll have you think some things that you probably wouldn't want to share, and maybe you would, you know. But what I want you to do, if you're willing, is to think of a thought that you have, maybe about yourself, maybe a self-evaluation that you really wouldn't want anyone to know, that you're sort of uncomfortable with, and when it comes up, you're like one I've been having lately is, I'm really getting old. When did all these wrinkles start happening? When the hell did that happen? That is not fair. I am unattractive. Or, I'm not good enough. Or, I'm not funny enough. Or, I'll never be worthy of love. Whatever it is, I want you to sort of let one of those thoughts that you have bubble up to the surface just for a minute, okay? And for the first part of this exercise, all I want you to do is have that thought. Sort of just let it go by. Just kind of say, yeah, I'm unlovable. I am unattractive. And just sort of let it be, marinate in it, buy it, it's true. Let it go. Just for 10 seconds. I'm not enough. I'm not that funny. I'll never be successful. Whatever. Okay. That was just 10 seconds. Now what I want you to do is think that thought to yourself. But in front of the thought, I want you to say, in your mind, I'm having the thought that I'm unattractive. 10 seconds. Having the thought having a thought, then I'll never be enough. Okay. Now I want you to do this. I notice, add this to it, I notice that I'm having a thought that I'm adopting for 10 seconds. And now finally, last one, think this. I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that I'm unattracted. 10 seconds. Okay. Now I want you to notice what happened to that thought. Notice what happened to its white. Just with that simple little trick. What was it, 30, 40 seconds that we did? Making some distance between you, the thinker, and your thoughts. You are not the sum total of your thoughts. You are more than the sum of your thoughts. Creating some distance. Not that that thought's going to go away. In fact, we sat here thinking these horrible, difficult thoughts for 40 seconds. And yet, it might be possible, while we invite them in, and notice that I'm having a thought, that we can get untouched from it. So, this is one of my favorite quotes from Coyne. And I have sort of a cool exercise. This one's a little harder. And I really enjoy it. I really love it. And I think that you might too. You don't have to do it. Okay? But if you're willing, what I'm going to ask you to do is stand up and notice the people around you. And I'm going to lead you through just a brief eyes open, noticing exercise. That's it. You willing? You totally don't have to do it, I promise. But if you are, those of you who are, just stand up for a moment. And just take some deep breaths. And what I want you to do is just sort of standing where you are, noticing whatever you're noticing, notice being in the room. And now, this is the tough part. I want you to notice what this is like if you're willing. Just notice the people around you. Make eye contact for as long as you feel comfortable. Notice that every single person in this room has had the experience of laughing so hard that it's hurt. Every single person in this room has had the experience of losing something or someone that they have cared about. Every person has lost, has had the experience of working really hard at something, of going beyond what they thought they might be capable of. Every person has had the experience of feeling like they've failed, that they've tried. Every person in this room has felt vulnerable. At one point. Just take a moment to notice each other. See what that's like. Every single person has felt a little scared to notice people around. Every person in this room has experienced joy. Now, thank you. You guys are really wonderfully, beautifully, gorgeously good, and I love that. So here's the thing. Can you guys remember, can you think of a time when you had a conversation with somebody where you really felt listened to and seen, like where they really got you? And it was like, they didn't even need to say anything, but they were right there and you were like, yeah. And you didn't have to hide anything, and you didn't have to be anything different. You didn't have to try to be funny. You could just be. Guess what? You guys can make that space for other people in your life through just mindfully moves. Just mindfulness. Look at the look here. These are kids. One of them is my daughter, the big one. The other one is our little friend. They're twins. They're from Canada, and their names are Indian and Kimmel, and I can never ever tell them apart. So this is either Emil or Kimmel. But look at that. Do you see the connection? So this is the cool thing about mindfulness, right? Noticing, being awake and aware. Think about the conversations you have with people. Think about, like, are you making a mental grocery list, or are you really there? What if it was possible that we could make a space for other people to just be, just by our attention? Wouldn't that be freaking amazing? Guess what? When I lose my faith in humanity, I start to do this. And it happens a lot, believe me. On a daily basis, I'm not kidding. It really does. If I remember this, and I start walking around, just simply making a space for other people to be. Not to make anything go away, not to fix anything, but simply to show up. So, I'm going to leave you with one other piece of that. Okay? And it's called value. So we did the mindfulness piece. Mindfulness involves lots of things. Being aware of the present moment, being willing to experience all of our sensations, some of them positive, some of them negative. And it opens up possibilities for really living quite differently than we might do on a day-to-day basis. Valuing means doing what matters to you. Okay? So an act, people, when they talk about values, like, so it doesn't mean anything like moralistic or anything like that. Right? What it means is, if you were to make your life about something, like if you had one shot to make your life about something you really deeply cared the most about, what would that thing be? What would you be doing? And as soon as I say that, I'm sure your minds are saying, yeah, that's kind of, yeah, but I have to work, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. My mind does that too, all the time. It's incessant. Very good at talking to me, trying to talk to me. Okay. So values are not goals, because they're not things that we can attain. So when I say a value, I don't mean like, if you were to say to me, I want to get that top job, well, you could attain that. It's great. What do you want to do with that top job? You want to be an excellent what? Well, I want to have a boyfriend. I want to have a girlfriend. Well, what does that mean? What kind of a partner do you want to be? What kind of a relationship do you want to have? What kind of a space do you want to create for love in your life, for connection, for closeness? Right? It's like the difference between saying, I want to go west, there's always more west, or I want to get to California. I love this. Thank you for making me feel funny. I love that. This is good. Okay? So they might include personal goals. There might be things that you choose to do that are attainable. But your goals are always in the service of something else. And so the cool thing about values is that they give you a direction. So like a lot of approaches to psychological well-being are, do I feel better or worse? We acknowledge and act that you're going to feel better and worse sometimes. Some days are going to be really hard. There might be days where you don't feel like staying on the planet. I say that in all seriousness. Act is about how well, how willing are you, and with what integrity are you pursuing those things that you care most deeply about. Now, if you haven't given this much thought, and we don't really talk about this very often. We talk about day-to-day stuff. What I want to do is leave you with just an imaginal exercise to get you connected, to see if you might connect with us. So if you're willing, I'll do this one quickly. I'd like you to close your eyes. Just take a few centering breaths. And I want you to imagine, through magic, doing magic, that you have the ability to meet 90-year-old you who has come back to you today with the benefit of his or her experience of many, many, many more years, many more struggles, much more living than you have right now. The 90-year-old you is here to give you, at the end of his or her life, advice. 90-year-old you has seen the future, has lived it, and has gone through everything that you have, and much, much, much more. He or she is going to give you 3 pieces of advice, and all I want you to do is listen for the answers. The first piece of advice is, you have spent far too much time doing. Listen for the answer. Just let it bubble up. The second piece of advice is, you have spent far too little time listen for the answer. The final piece of advice he or she has, if you could choose one small thing moving forward that would make a meaningful difference in your life, you should just listen, notice what your mind is saying, notice what your heart is saying. Ready, you can open your eyes. I hope that he or she gave you good advice. The last piece of that is that last piece of advice, making that commitment. Even if it's one small thing moving forward, what would you do that would fill your life with more of the things that you care about, no matter how small it is? What would you be willing to do in taking that first step with commitment? Thank you guys very much. You are amazing and fabulous, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And I hope that there is something in this that you take home and use. This is my family. No, but apparently I don't have the right nose. I was the only one in the family who couldn't do the thing with the spoon. Which I thought was funny, because so many things picture of all of us. Yeah, the least talented, clearly, in this family. No, you just try it. So here's how to do that. On a spoon, and see if you can hang it on your nose. It's fun. At least you'll take that one. There's nothing else. So any questions quickly before we get out of here?
Something I seems contrary to my own experience is that, like, the thought or the thing or this things going on, the noise is always going to be there. But I don't know if that's true. I mean, if you change patterns so that, I mean, like if you're doing more of the stuff that's really good for you and not harmful for the world, it's like whatever was bringing you down, you're not as involved with it.
That's exactly right. It's not, maybe it's there, maybe it's not. But the trick is, you're not as involved with it. You're not as moved by it. That's exactly my experience. Because sometimes those thoughts will be there, sometimes they won't. If we get caught up in them, struggling to make them go away, guess what?
They're winning.
They're winning. They tend to stay longer. And so there's that metaphor of I was trying to research where this came from, but this Native American myth about like that each of us has a dog that's evil and a dog that's good in us, and they fight all the time. And how do we deal with that? Do we fight, or what do we do? And so the elder of the tribe said, well, it depends on who you feed, not who you fight. Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah.
Talk a little more about the flip side of, not just what to do with the bad thoughts with bad feelings, like applying the same principles to the good. Or, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I do, actually. So, here's the thing. When we have thoughts that are hard, right away, at least for me, I go into like, if I'm not really mindful, right, I go into sort of problem-solving mode. I get hooked in them, and if I'm not really awake and on my feet, I'll be like, oh yeah, and then 10 minutes later, I'll be like, wow, I was really struggling with that thought. This happens actually late at night if I wake up and I worry. Okay. That's what happens. When I have good thoughts, you can get hooked on those too. You can chase them. That's one thing, is like, how can I have more of those? But sometimes we just appreciate them because they feel good. So I would say, actually, I would use the same approach, because you can get just as hooked on, I'm fabulous, look at me, and then you won't see anything else other than that. And you might not notice that, hey, maybe you hurt someone's feelings or something. You know what I mean? So my approach would be to just notice that those are thoughts too, to enjoy them, to appreciate them, and to bring that same appreciation to both positive and negative thoughts. But to kind of notice that, try not to get involved with them, as you said.
Yeah, because the positive thought is the more you contact it comes, and then you're sort of the opposite of the negative thoughts. You're so focusing on it, and it's not going to be there, and they're not. And they allow them.
Right. And there's this thing that happens when we're in our heads, right? If you like living while you're doing serial sevens, whether they're positive thoughts or negative thoughts, if I asked you to do serial sevens, how much do you think you'd notice what was going on in the room? I mean, I'm crappy at math, so like for me, I wouldn't notice any of you. I feel like, So just getting hooked on any thoughts has sort of the same effect, where you're not really noticing what might be possible, what the situation might afford for you. You might not contact that, like, there's something in this moment for you, about connecting with someone else, about enjoying something you do, all of that. It's interesting. So one thing to do is go home and notice with your own experience what happens. Like, because I can tell you this stuff, and your experiences may be the same or different, but you should notice your experience as your teacher, not me, not what I say. Okay? Check it out for yourself. See what happens. Take it for a drive. Take it for a test drive. Okay.
Hi. I really appreciate your lecture. It was extremely well said and and I use a lot of this when I did your lecture about 20 years ago. Have tried to help other people with that whole thing about fighting between thoughts, often like the weather, like clouds going by, and it was very well said. And I really appreciate thinking about your 90% view of the fact. I never thought of it that way. So because what I did is kind of this what, everyone can bond in a different way at different times. And for me, it was, I saw myself as an older person, and I said, I don't want to have what I have now as an older person. It's pretty much the same principle. And I said, I can't be like that then. And so the advice was, I need to do something now, and I don't want to have this later. And it was really what basically gave me the drive to say, I'm going to do things, to go to your edge of your comfort level and do things that you really, you never know. You never know what's going to happen, and there is no sure shot what's going to happen. And except this, you're going to have touching something or whatever. It could kill someone, but you never know. And so that's what helped me to accept it. You're very well said. So thank you.
Thank you. That's gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing. You guys are amazing. I don't want you to leave. All right. I think we're going to get kicked out in a minute because I think we're going to need some room or something else. But if you want to contact me or anything like that, I'm very happy to come back. My email's there, and I believe the organizer of the talk has you're welcome to slide. But thank you. Thank you very much.